Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this hybrid meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission. Let me just start. Declarations of pecuniary interest. I see none. And apologies for absence. Councillor Porcola, we've had apologies. Welcome, Councillor McGrath as his substitute. Can I take the minutes of our last meeting? Any discussion of those? Are we happy to take them as agreed? We are. Thank you. I'm going to change the order of the agenda. You'll see that the item 4 is the Chaz proposals. It's quite important that scrutiny is carried out in public in the interest of transparency. In this instance, though, I have looked at the proposals and I feel any discussion of them is potentially commercially sensitive, so I don't even think we can get into a preliminary discussion without mentioning figures. So at that point, I'm taking that at the end, and at that point the meeting will be closed to the public, and that does include the YouTube feed. Yes, so if anybody's logged in just for that, I'm afraid you will be disappointed. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just say I completely understand and where you're coming from. I mean, like yourself, would like to have this in public, but nature of the subject means that it's important that the full length of scrutiny is held, and that unfortunately means your as you say, as your decision needs to be enacted.
I certainly took advice too from our head of legal on that point, and she agreed. Good, so we're going to start by looking at two linked items, the hate crime strategy and safety of women and girls. The first of those is on page 211. Yes. Okay, got it. What I'd like to do here is to invite Peter Clifton, our head of community safety, to just introduce the item, and then we'll put questions to Peter, and welcome also to Agatha as a cabinet member, Agatha, and to Katie Saunders as a member of the team.
Thank you, Chair. I'll ask Katie to say a few words to introduce the item, and then to lead on the questions for the hate crime one, and then in relation to the safety of women and girls, I will say some words on that.
Thanks, Peter. Good evening, councillors. As Peter said, I'll just talk through some key points from the report. So hate crime is a strategic priority for the Community Safety Partnership and has been under our portfolio since 2016. So some key pieces of work that have been done in that period included the formation of the Hate Crime Strategy Group, which has representatives from the council, police, and most importantly from the community representing the different strands of hate crime. Other initiatives which were launched were the launch of our hate crime advice surgeries, our third-party reporting scheme, and the marking of Hate Crime Awareness Week each year. In terms of the Hate Crime Strategy 22 to 26, obviously, our previous strategy covered 2017 to 2021, and following consultation with the Hate Crime Strategy Group, we agreed to split the document into a separate strategy and work plan. So it uses the old strategy as a basis and incorporates the work we have done over the past 4 years and our aims going forward. The draft strategy has been produced in consultation with members of the Hate Crime Strategy Group and their communities, whose feedback has been incorporated. It also includes information from the Safer Merton Community Safety Survey in 2021, your Merton consultation, and the Resident Survey 2021. The strategy is based around 4 strategic aims: so preventing hate crime, protecting the victim, providing support to hate crime victims, and developing a partnership approach to tackling perpetrators. The strategic aims will be delivered by an annual work plan whose actions are reviewed on a quarterly basis by the Hate Crime Strategy Group. And one of our ideas is at the end of each financial year, we're going to produce an annual report, an easy to read, user-friendly version of the work that we've done over the past year and our aims going forward to be circulated to the community. And this year's work plan, we've got one we're working on currently, which was circulated with the papers. And this year's work plan will be finalised in April this year to be launched alongside the new strategy. And again, it will be produced in consultation with the Hate Crime Strategy Group and their communities. Just some other key updates. Naomi Martin of the Commonside Community Trust is the chair of our Hate Crime Strategy Group, so it's independently chaired by a member of the community. We had Hate Crime Awareness Week in October, which we were able to do, pleasingly, a mix of online and face-to-face engagement events this year, and they covered the different strands of hate crime. We also had a social media campaign, and that included a very positive video from the captain of AFC Wimbledon, which got us a good response. In December, we launched the Stop Hate UK helpline in Merton. That's being charitably funded for 3 years. And that's a 24-hour, 7 days a week helpline for victims and witnesses of hate crime. And it also provides an option for them to make a third-party report to the police. There's going to be awareness raising sessions in partnership with Stop Hate UK taking place this year. And that will be for both the community and a session specifically for counsellors. Our hate crime advice surgeries continue on a monthly basis. They're taking place over the phone at the moment due to COVID, but hopefully in the coming months, we'll be back to moving face-to-face in the reception in the Merton Link area of the reception of the Civic Centre. There's regular messaging that goes out on social media via the council's social media channels, reassurance messaging that hate in any form is not targeted, it's not tolerated in Merton, and by promoting our support services. We'll also be linking in over the coming months with key awareness dates. First of those probably being an in-person ceremony for Ida Hobbit International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia and Transphobia, with the raising of the rainbow flag outside the Civic Centre. Thank you.
Questions? Ben, please.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, thank you for this really interesting report here. I've got a few questions, if the Chair will allow me. Just firstly on the kind of where we are situation. So it seems to be that COVID slowed down hate crime just through lack of footfall and interactions in the public, but there seems to be an uptick now that we're getting out there again. How would you characterize that? I mean, there was probably an expectation once we got out of COVID that would sadly go to increasing again. What was your expectations versus what's happening now on that? And then how's that compared to London overall? And then you've got the strategy here. Are there any in particular parts of that strategy that have been impacted by COVID and how fast we are recovering from it? And was there an opportunity with those the hate crime advice surgeries? You mentioned that that's going to be in this building. Are there partnerships with schools and things like that? Could you expand on those opportunities for those surgeries as well? Thank you.
Thank you. So in terms of the figures, you're right that the most of hate crimes are aggravated, not motivated. So it's not somebody setting out that day to go and commit a hate crime, although that does happen also. It's when people are having those interactions with each other that hate crime occurs. So it did dip, as with most crime, dipped during the pandemic, because people aren't out and about in the town centres, out in the nighttime economy. So we're starting to see it rise back to roughly normal levels, and that's the same across London. In terms of how our strategy has been affected by the COVID pandemic, obviously our key partners in this are our community groups. So we're keen to support them. We were checking in with them regularly, and they were feeding back to us throughout COVID if they were noticing any tensions in their community. And then that reassurance messaging played a key part in that we were constantly putting out via our social media and getting our partners to speak to their communities and retweet our messages, that there are support services available for people. All our support services, and that's all our third-party reporting centres. Our community groups play a large part. Many of them are our third-party reporting centres. Although they weren't seeing their clients face-to-face, which wasn't ideal because many of them have a personal relationship with them, they were still open throughout the pandemic, so they were still available to provide support. In terms of the hate crime advice surgery, so that happens once a month in the Civic Centre or over the phone at the moment. That's not the only place that people can go to report a hate crime if they don't feel comfortable reporting to the police. So we have our third-party reporting centres, so they're out in the community. And one of the key pillars of our strategy is expanding the number of centres we have and where we have them. Obviously, last year we had a few of the sports clubs signed up. So Tooting and Mitcham FC, Wimbledon AFC, and another football club, but we have plans to expand the scheme into youth centres. We've got links with Merton College. We made a video with them in the past, a hate crime video for young people. So exploring that further as to where we can make more third-party reporting centres that are accessible to young people. And also there's some work to be done around, now we're coming out of COVID, thankfully, that engagement with the local businesses, chicken shops, taxi firms, nail bars. We've gone round and leafleted them before and spoke to them about hate crime before the pandemic, and they're always quite responsive. So the aim will be to get back out and go and do that again. And if any of them wanted to join as a third-party reporting centre, they'd be more than welcome.
John.
Get any of this information from the police?
Yes, so as part of our hate crime strategy group, we work in partnership with the police, and the police now have a dedicated hate crime officer. So if somebody reports a hate crime or a hate crime is flagged as a hate crime, they get a follow-up from it's PC Claire Wilding at the moment. They'll get a follow-up call from Claire checking that they've been offered support, and they'll be referred to a pan-London group of support services, agencies like Tell Mama or the Community CST Trust for Anti-Semitic Hate Crimes. So yes, we work very closely with the police.
Let me take the next question from Una Stannard.
Thank you very much. I mean, I found these reports and their detail very interesting and very constructive. I have one area where I would be keen to hear just a little more. I've noted the Merton College and the video there, and I note that there are some things with emotional intelligence and neighbourhood watch activities geared, I think, with primary school children. I'm really quite keen to know a little more, if it's available, on secondary age work with schools, particularly pre-sixth form, so that 11 to 16 range, how they are being, as it were, captured within this and helped to contribute to this strategy and to develop good practices early on.
Thank you. So in terms of the work we do, each year during Hate Crime Awareness Week, you'll be aware there's schools, the police have schools officers in the secondary schools. So they do outreach sessions, assemblies, and link in with us during that week in terms of Hate Crime Awareness Week. And then it's incorporated in our hate crime strategy group. Keith Shipland, who represents education, sits on our group and feeds into us. So it's incorporated in terms of the PHSE lessons that the pupils have.
Thank you. Has there been any specific evaluation done on that?
No, not currently, but it's something we can liaise with Keith about and see if we can get some information.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for coming for this item. It's really, really interesting. My ward in Pollard's Hill, so I know Naomi very well and the work she's doing on this. I've got two questions. One about the Safer Merton Community Safety Survey in 2021, where you talk about number of respondents, and 1/4 of them approximately had a concern about this. It'd be great to understand what further work has been done with them in terms of engagement and follow-up. That's on page 223. And then more broadly about the work programme. From my understanding, and do correct me wrong, this work programme is for the current financial year. So we've got a few ambers on there as well. What's the plan to mitigate or escalate that? Is there an overall view of programme health? And this is your opportunity to bid, shout more. Is there anything more that we can do to support the programme itself and its programme health, so that moving forward, we can turn some of these ambers into green, whether that be through money, through advocacy, through escalation, through us intervening at the local level. So for example, I saw there was a yellow about Clarion's involvement. My committee next week is going to be meeting with Clarion. Is there something we can triangulate to try and solve this problem?
Thank you. I'll take that one first. Yeah, I mean, Clarion actually engaged with us well. We have a representative from Clarion on our hate crime strategy group. I suppose where the ask for assistance would be perhaps some of the other housing associations. We don't have great engagement with them despite our best attempts. So Clarion are good at engaging. They sit on the group, but perhaps some assistance with some of the other housing associations in the borough would be good. The action plan is very much a work in progress. So each time the hate crime strategy group meet, which is quarterly, we review the plan and go through the actions. So, even since that plan's been submitted, there's probably been some changes on that. So we're next meeting in a couple of weeks, we'll be going through it again. So in terms of the plan, obviously we've got a new one coming for April 22. We'll be looking at what we haven't achieved so far and what needs to go on to the next plan. I'm not saying we're going to achieve all of this plan in the next few months. I mean, we've done a great deal of work, but there's still much to do. So some of those actions will be carried forward. In terms of the Safer Merton Community Safety Survey, yes, you see that 24% of respondents listed hate crimes being a fairly big or very big problem. That's something we'll take back and speak to our data analysts around the exact findings of the survey, and perhaps what groups in terms of demographics were responding in that way. One of our key sort of pillars of our work is reaching those areas and people in the community, but that may feel they have barriers where they don't want to speak to the council or the police. So that's where our relationships with the community groups come in. We've got good representation on the hate crime strategy group at the moment, but we're always open to more groups joining. I went to visit the Muslim Women of Merton a couple of weeks ago, and they're going to be joining the hate crime strategy group and hopefully becoming a hate crime third-party reporting centre. So there's definitely further areas of our community we need to reach. So it's something we're going to be working on also.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for your report. If I don't think there's a comparable chart in here, maybe there is and I've missed it, but on page 251 of our report, we've got the chart which shows the numbers of recorded hate crimes in England and Wales. And it shows obviously a more than doubling nationally of hate crimes recorded since the year 2012, 2013 through to 2019-20. And I'm kind of assuming there's been a similar rise in Merton, but that might be incorrect. But I suppose what I'm interested in is, do we, I don't want this to sound crass, do we see an increase in the number of hate crimes being recorded a result of campaigning work and other work that organizations and teams such as yours do in terms of raising awareness of hate crime, what constitutes a hate crime and when to report a hate crime, and so is it kind of that in a way we want to see more of these crimes being recorded if they are actually happening anyway and perhaps weren't being recorded as hate crimes? Or is it that actually the number of hate crimes is actually increasing at such a rate? Do you have a view on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say for definite. I think it's probably a bit of both. Obviously, since 2012, I mean, we've been working on this since 2016. General public awareness of what a hate crime is, I think, has increased. Our campaigning's hopefully increased that. So in some ways, we do want to see a continued increase in hate crime. It sounds strange to say, but we want people to report it and know that they can report it. There's huge amounts of underreporting still. People are probably experiencing hate crimes and either not realizing it is a hate crime or because of those barriers feel they can't report it. We do notice when there are terrorist attacks or when, for instance, there was the murder of George Floyd last year, we tend to then see a spike in the figures following that. And whether that's people, unfortunately, more motivated to go out and commit a hate crime after those events, or whether it's people seeing things in the press and feeling that they should come forward and report. Again, it's hard to say. It's probably a bit of both.
There's information in the report about where in the borough those who've been reported being victims of hate crimes are, but unless I've missed it, there's no information on the sort of settings in which sort of hate crimes are happening. So obviously you've worked with football clubs, and so it'd be good to know the extent to which it's at football clubs, it's in pubs and bars, it's in the street, it's in the park, it's at schools. I think it'd be helpful to have a sort of appreciate. It might be harder to break down, and some of it may be some more anecdotal, but yeah, it'd just be helpful to understand where it's happening. I appreciate it's probably a mix of all of the above, but if there's some that jump out more than others.
Yeah, thanks. That's a good point, and something we could take back, because this profile our data analyst produces in Safer Merton, and it's updated every year. So it's something perhaps we can look in terms of breaking down the data further. I think generally, as I said, most hate crimes are aggravated. So it's out when people are out and about. So, in terms of perhaps Wimbledon Town Centre, where you've got the bars and clubs. So around the town centres, just where people are having more interactions in general. But that's something we can take back, definitely see for the profile for future, if we can break that down a bit further.
And then just another one actually I missed off my list. Presumably sort of online kind of comes into borough figures as well. I appreciate it's kind of harder to understand because it's harder to track what's happening and who's where and all the rest of it, but presumably the sort of the stuff that's reported, that includes online. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, I've had meetings with the Met online hub, hate crime hub, and there is a lot of work going on in the police with regards to that. But as you said, it is quite hard for them to pinpoint where the perpetrators are because of the way technology works. But it's something the Met are working on, and we're going to link in with them in terms of any future campaigns they might be doing around that.
Yeah, I've got a question, Kate, if I may. This is page 223. It talks about the resident survey and showing that the most recent one registers the fact that people are in fact less positive about community cohesion in their area compared with last time it was done. And yet, when we look at the Your Merton consultation, feedback is sort of resident wants to maintain and foster the sense of community spirit. And I find a bit of a contradiction in that. I think I can understand it, but I'd be interested in your interpretation of why some people feel there's been a drop in community cohesion, and yet they feel that's something they want to see fostered.
Yeah, I suppose that, I mean, people had people in different areas of the borough, and according to their socioeconomic circumstances, perhaps had different experiences during the pandemic. So they may have perceived what has gone on slightly differently. So some people may have felt isolated, and they may have seen what was going on in the press perhaps at the time. We had the murder of George Floyd and other events. Then at the same time, during the pandemic, there was a lot of good community spirit going on in general. I see that with the work that we do in Neighbourhood Watch. And I think that it demonstrated that people do want to speak to their neighbours, to be part of their community, and to hear their voices heard. And they wanted to support each other. So that was a positive that came out of it. So yeah, I point taken, I can see that it does look like a bit of a contradiction. But in terms of, our work, it's having that focus on the community. We don't want to dictate's the wrong word, but we don't want to dictate what our plan is. We want it to be coming from the community and to hear the community's voice in our plans and in our actions.
Yeah, thank you for that very much. My own feeling that the pandemic affected different people in different ways. There are people who are still, I think, feeling very isolated, and it wasn't all Don's Local Action Group and marvelous, but these things can coexist side by side, and we have to be, I think, mindful of those who still feel vulnerable and rather sensitive. John, let me.
When you look at the table on page 251, you can see increase year after year, goes up from 2014. What do we do with the figures when we collect it, the information we get? What do we as a council do with the figures? And how can we help or, prevent this hate crime? Every year it goes up and you're collecting figures, information every year. We're not helping anyone, okay?
So we monitor the figures closely. Our data analyst produces figures every month, and will flag up if he sees a certain rise in a particular area. Again, as I said, sometimes these are influenced by external factors, what's going on in the world outside us, not just in Merton. But we're very much monitoring that closely, and with the police as well, and flagging up where we see any potential areas of tension. And in terms of what we can do, and what our ask of is you as councillors, it's, you're out there, you've got those key contacts within the community, and it's when we're having, our engagement weeks, our engagement events that happen throughout the year, it's spreading the word and letting people know that there are the support services available in Merton, and that doesn't just mean report to the police. There are plenty of other avenues that you can report to. We've also got the Stop Hate UK line now, which is something was good news, because obviously our community groups are there, but they're probably not going to be working at anything other than 9 to 5. So now we've got a 24-hour, 7 days a week service for people to get some support and advice if they require it. So it's spreading the word about all these initiatives really to all parts of the community.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Katie. On page 261, we talk about sanction and court outcomes. The SD detection rate of hate crimes across the MPS has increased for overall hate crime from 12 to 14 for 12 months to March 2021, but the figure for Merton Borough fell from 12 to 10%. Is there a reason for that? Or...
I've got police colleagues on the call. Sarah, I don't know if Sarah, you want to chip in here. I think in terms of hate crime, it's a hard one. There are low numbers of people being prosecuted. Some of that can be because sometimes in many crimes, the perpetrator isn't identified. If an offence happens in a public place, it's not necessarily the CCTV or the forensic evidence that you might get with other crimes. Sarah, I don't know if you have a view, if you want to add anything to that.
Sarah, are you there able to comment on that for us? Sarah Robertson.
I was intrigued but interested in the launch of the Stop Hate Helpline in Merton, and this may be in there, and I know it only launched in December, but do we have any idea how much that's being used?
They're going to be coming to our next meeting in a couple of weeks with their first sort of quarterly report. I know calls have been coming through because we've had some referrals back into the council, but I haven't got the figures yet, but that's something we'll be getting in the coming weeks.
Thanks, Chair. Just on building on that, what's the plan for the phone line, in a sense that it is limited time in sense of its operation and capacity? Are there any plans to evolve that model to potentially have messaging services. So, for example, it's more rapid fire sort of bots guiding the type of answers, and then if it needs human escalation, then that can get involved, because I would assume, again, I may be wrong, a lot of the queries you're getting can be streamlined into a pathway, which makes them ideal for automation, and then increase the number of reports, as colleagues have raised before, to try and get them converted into then further cases moving forward.
Thank you. So the phone line is 24 hours, 7 days a week, but there is a text number as well, which we can circulate the details afterwards for people who don't, perhaps because of a disability, they can't speak over the phone or would prefer texting. So there is a text number, and I think there is also a web chat, but I'll confirm that.
If there are no more questions, let me take you to the recommendations here. And particularly recommendation B on page 211. And as John has rightly said, hate crime is the business of all of us, and anything we can do as elected members, we should be looking to do. I am struck that we have a lot of stats, notoriously difficult field, crime stats to interpret. And while they're of value, also at that kind of more granular or even anecdotal level, we may have a feel of situations in our wards that are not fully reflected in the figures, and we should be prepared to feed that in. The other point that occurs to me is that it is very important that those who are elected come this May, new councillors are fully briefed into this as quickly as possible, and how the role they can play in supporting your work. So thank you for that, Katie, very much.
Thank you.
Let me come on to our second item on this strand on page 263, safety of women and girls in Merton, and not just in Merton, but everywhere. This has gone right up the agenda, hasn't it, as an important issue. So who's going to talk us into this one, Peter? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, councillors. The purpose of this report is to provide the committee with an update on the work of the Safety and Women and Girls Officer Task Group. This group was formed in 2001 to look at what additional steps council can take to improve the safety of women and girls in Merton. The report contains information on the existing partnership response to violence against women and girls, the work of the task group, and plans for additional interventions to improve safety, as well as details of funding secured in relation to those interventions. In light of the range of activity which is happening and which will be happening focused in this area, the report also makes a recommendation to the committee that Merton Council sign up to the Mayor's Nighttime Safety Charter in a statement of the Council's commitment to improve safety for women and girls. So I'll highlight some of the key areas and key points within the report. Sections 2.1 to 2.4 sets out some of the background context. The council passed a motion in April 2021, and that was following the murder of Sarah Everard, and the formation of the Safety of Women and Girls Task Group stemmed from that motion. Section 2.4 provides an overview of some of the analysis of crime data, as well as the consultations which have taken place, and some notes to highlight there in particular. We know that overall, Merton remains one of London's safest boroughs. In 2001, Merton had the third lowest overall crime rate out of the 32 London boroughs, and the fourth lowest rate of violent crime. We also know that certain crime types disproportionately affect victims who are women or girls, in particular sexual offences, where women or girls make up 85% of the victims, and domestic abuse offences, where women and girls make up 72% of the victims. More recently, events including the tragic murders of Sarah Everard in Clapham in March in 2001, Sabina Nessa in Greenwich in September 2021, and Wafa Yasmin Chakafi in Maida Vale very recently in January 2022 have led to an increased focus on the safety of women and girls. And some of that increased focus has been reflected in the results to come back through the consultations. I would draw attention to some of the results highlighted there from the Merton Community Safety Survey, which took place in late 2021. The recent survey noted that there was an increase in the proportion of female respondents reporting feeling unsafe outside at night, 45% compared to 38% in the 2019 survey. The survey also found that female respondents were almost 1.5 times more likely to report feeling unsafe outside at night than male respondents. And there was a substantial difference noted in the perceptions of safety between the daytime and nighttime hours, with 38% of females reporting feeling unsafe outside after dark, compared to only 5% in the daytime. Section 2.5 provides an overview of what the council and its partners have been doing to tackle violence against women and girls. Safer Merton continues to coordinate the partnership approach to responding to violence against women and girls as part of the core business, and violence against women and girls remains a strategic priority for the Safer Stronger Executive Board. Current work here includes the development of a new violence against women and girls strategy, which is being developed and due for launch around September this year. The Merton Violence Against Women and Girls Board is looking at adding a specific partnership priority objective within that strategy to be focused around improving the safety of women and girls. Section 2.8 provides details of some of the frontline services in place which provide support and advocacy for victims of domestic abuse. And section 2.9 details some of the work which is taking place focused on improving safety in the outdoor spaces. And this is where one of the areas where there's an increased focus that the council has around improving safety outdoors. We're working with the police to share information and try and identify where the locations are, where residents have raised concerns about, and then look at what can be done to improve safety at those locations. And a recent example of this is work currently underway in relation to Wandle Park, where there's a safety review and a crime prevention review that's taking place at the moment that's going to identify measures that can be put in place to improve safety. I would also like to highlight here something that links into this, and this is the Park Ranger pilot that the Public Spaces Service will be trialling this year as one of the Merton 2030 plans, and this will involve high visibility patrols in the parks to provide reassurance to residents using those parks. And that's something we'll be, again, looking at in terms of what are the best places and locations and times for those patrols to take place to have the most effect. I would say also that the council is far from alone in seeking to take action in this area, and section 2.13 to 2.22 details some of the work being done by partners, including the Metropolitan Police. And I'll just highlight a few points there. The police are stepping up activity focused around preventing nighttime violence. They're piloting a scheme called Project Vigilant, which is an operation focused around tackling predatory male behavior around the nighttime economy and involves patrols focused around those nighttime economy hotspots. The Met's updated violence against women and girls plan specifically is setting out to increase the number of perpetrators who are brought to justice for violence against women and girls, and also is focused on doing a lot of work with nighttime economy venues, including delivering training to staff and promoting the Ask for Angela scheme, whereby bars, restaurants, clubs and other businesses can participate in that scheme, and staff can receive training so that if somebody feels unsafe or vulnerable, they can discreetly ask for help by asking the staff member for Angela, which is a coded phrase to mean that they're in they feel they're in an unsafe situation and would like to seek help. Another initiative that the Met is rolling out in Merton is the Walk and Talk. This is across London, but it's also started in Merton already, and it involves officers going out and on walks and runs with women in local areas to hear the views directly. And that's something also the Safer Merton team will be looking at linking in with the Met on. In relation to hearing and understanding the views of people in Merton and women and girls in Merton about where they feel unsafe, the Met has launched Street Safe. This is a London-wide initiative, and it's an online site where people can report the locations and times that they're unsafe. And the Safer Merton team is linking in with the Met around this in terms of the local data, again, so that we can use that to inform us around where we make sure we focus our efforts. I'll also, if I could draw attention to 2.25, this section details some of the additional work that's being carried out by the Safety of Women and Girls Task Group. So that's work has included conducting focus sessions. There was a counsellors focus group in November focused around the safety of women and girls. There was also a licensing focusing session led by the council's licensing team, and that looked at exploring opportunities for engagement with licensed premises, raising awareness amongst them of the Ask for Angela campaign, as well as the other training that is available. In relation to that, the police have allocated a number of officers in the borough who will be helping to deliver WAVE training and Ask for Angela training to licensed premises. Another key area of work that the group has been focusing on has been developing proposals for new interventions and seeking to secure funding for those interventions. So in July last year, the group developed a bid that was submitted to the Home Office Safer Street Fund, and also another bid that went to the Home Office's Safety of Women at Night Fund. Whilst both of those bids unfortunately were unsuccessful, the ideas that were developed form the basis of subsequent proposals, as a result of which 38,000 has been secured to help deliver these interventions in Merton and improve safety. And that 38,000 is comprised of 15,000 approved by Cabinet as part of the Merton 2030 implementation, and just over 23,000 from the MOPAC LCPF funding. There's a number of interventions that will be enabled as a result of this, and these are detailed on 2.29. So there's three specific ones. So firstly, investment to increase the capacity of the Merton Street Pastor scheme. That will look to enable an additional 20 street pastors to be trained and to be able to be present at the nighttime economy locations, and that will build on the existing Merton Street Pastor scheme. The second area is focused support for nighttime economy staff, and this will involve the licensing team deploying a specific welfare licensing, deploying designated welfare licensing officers to key nighttime economy locations in the borough on Friday nights and Saturday nights, in the evening and in the early hours, to check on those licensed premises and provide support and guidance where necessary. And the third specific intervention is a Safety of Women and Girls at Night survey, which will involve Crime Stoppers being commissioned to carry out this survey, and the information that will gather will be used by the tasking group to help us better understand the views, the concerns of people locally, the locations and times where there appear to be vulnerabilities, and also explore in more depth some of the issues such as disproportionality amongst different groups of demographics, whether that be by age, by gender, by ethnicity as well, and understand what some of the different challenges might be there.
Peter, I'd like to leave plenty of time for questions. So
certainly I can draw quickly to a conclusion.
Thank you.
So alongside this, there will be a wide-ranging communications campaign. And finally, in terms of next steps, because we see this very much as the beginning rather than the end, the tasking group will continue to meet and focus and develop work on a number of areas that are set out in section 2.44. And as I said, on the basis of the range of work being undertaken, we put the recommendation forward that Merton Council is in a good position to sign up to the Mayor's Safety at Night Charter.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for your report. It's really interesting reading. So I've got two streams of questions. One is about sign up to the Mayor's pledge, the Charter, because the first point references appointing a organisational champion. Now, is there a plan to support that champion in terms of resourcing? And who, in your mind, would that champion be? Would it be an elected representative? Would it be a member of the community? Would it be an officer? What is the sort of the vision for that role? And secondly, I was just listening to a few of the challenges there. So my background in a previous life, I used to run the all-party parliamentary group for domestic and sexual violence. So I understand some of the challenges in terms of the charities who are providing support for women in need, particularly refuge spaces. And I started to reflect on some of the other points you talk about in terms of, say, community safety, access and parks and stuff, but all of it comes down to your internal spread. You've talked a lot about your external communication, your external engagement, but what are you doing, or what are the barriers internally, so that across all the themes and portfolios, there is a line that says, what are we doing on this? Because a lot of the stuff you talk about in terms of, there's lighting in parks, it's good design for communities, it's this, that, and the other, that we have a few levers that we can pull.
Thank you, Councillor. So in relation to the champion, I would of course be happy to take a steer from this committee on what the thoughts are. Myself, one of the suggestions I would make around that would be that that's a question we could take to the Violence Against Women and Girls Board, and then seek from that board a recommendation around who could fulfil that role. In relation to the point around internal training around these issues, that is certainly one of the key features of the existing Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, and will be very much part of the updated strategy, and that includes training for staff and also for managers. We're working on a policy, developing a policy at the moment around how managers can deal with situations if there's a domestic abuse issue identified that affects a member of staff.
Can I just, sorry, Peter, can I just very briefly come back on it just for clarification? I appreciate the absolutely great work that you got in there about training, but I should have been a bit clearer. I'm more referring to the strategic influence. So how are you across all the streams? It may not be an answer for now, but how's Future Merton looking at all the planning work we've got going on? How can we sort of dovetail a few of the things that you're talking about here that you identify? That's the type of thinking. Appreciate it comes out a bit in training, but that's the.
Thank you. So that will absolutely be a key part of the work of the task group. That task group has been across a wide-ranging number of departments across the council, and obviously linking in with the councillor session as well. And I think we've got some really specific schemes that we can implement, but alongside that, there's a huge piece of work to take place over the next 12 months around making sure we're linking in widely, because there's going to be lots of other things going on that actually could really sort of benefit, and we can dovetail them together. So that will certainly be one of the focuses of the task group, and I'll take that back to make sure that that's sort of embedded there. I also note, Chair, I think Zoe had a hand up, may want to come in.
Thanks, Peter. I just wanted to clarify WAVE. Some of you might be thinking what WAVE is, and it's the Welfare Vulnerability Engagement, and it's a training programme for door staff and staff in the nighttime economy, and it's about spotting when someone is vulnerable or someone needs kind of some additional support. So I just thought I'd highlight WAVE. It's not, WAVE as a hand. but it's, yeah, waivers in the training. And just to touch on, Peter, the HR guidance. So we are doing a lot of work around our guidance internally with staff and training up our staff and managers around supporting our own staff as well, which feeds into the nighttime charter and us signing up to it.
Thank you. I've got two questions, really. The first one is about restorative justice. That was in the motion that was passed by council. I can't see anything about it. Perhaps you could tell us about that. And the second one is a much more serious one. There's plenty in this document about women, but there's not very much about men. And the fundamental problem is men, not women. And it's violent men, not women. And I don't see anything in here that talks about the fundamental issue of how we stop men being violent towards women. I mean, literally, I don't see anything. And if I've missed it, I'm sure you can kindly point it out. And it seems to me that we're missing an enormous strand, which is how do we actually stop men behaving like this? And there's lots of good stuff about making women feel safer. Of course, we should do all of that. But the fundamental problem, there's nothing, for example, about what we do with young men in schools, boys and young men in schools. So it seems to me this paper as it stands doesn't seem to me really to tackle some of the fundamental issues, which is the behavior of men.
Thank you, Councillor. So I think, as I said, we see this very much as a beginning rather than an end, and I think your feedback is really spot on. And there is more of an emphasis needed there. Some of the particulars that are going to be focused around that that are referenced is the increased focus within the police around bringing perpetrators to justice. We're also going to be looking as part of our comms campaign around how we can include that focus. And one of the key things for the tasking group that they will be working on will be not only victims, but specifically perpetrators and what our strategy is around that. Part of the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, which is being developed for launch in September 2022, is specifically looking at how we can strengthen and get more focus on the work being done to tackle perpetrators. But I very much take that feedback back, and we'll look to increase the focus we have on that area. In relation to the restorative justice question, so the tasking group has started to explore the question of restorative justice in relation to domestic abuse and violence against women and girls. There are many situations where restorative justice brings many benefits, but in relation to domestic abuse, its use is, I would say, controversial, and there's a wide-ranging debate around the applicability of restorative justice in the domestic abuse context. The 2018 Sex Discrimination Law Review recommended against the use of restorative justice in domestic abuse context until women's organisations are confident that those interventions can be delivered in a way that would not harm victims and survivors. So it's something that is on the agenda for the task group to look at and monitor some of the work that's going on. There are some pilots in some parts of the country, but overall the situation remains, I would say, ambiguous and a challenging one regarding its use there.
Peter, just to add, I did have a meeting with, I think Councillor Kohler gave me a contact, and I had a meeting, I think, is it YME? And I had a meeting with them around the work they do around restorative justice and domestic abuse victims. And they've had a number of kind of positive cases. But what I noticed from those positive cases was that, you know, the perpetrator may be in prison or incarcerated. So actually it was quite a controlled restorative justice in the sense that, you know, they could arrange the meetings in a really controlled way. I think what we found was that if you've got kind of a perpetrator that only lives a few boroughs away and a victim that's here in Merton, then that safety issue becomes, you know, heightened around how do we keep our victims safe while going through restorative justice. You know, it's an option that we can offer victims at any point, because it's a service. If a victim wanted to take it up, by all means. But like Peter says, there's lots of groups, including ourselves, kind of looking at how it could work safely. and in what kind of settings. And I think it'd have to be a case by case kind of specific, really. But yeah, the organisation was doing some brilliant work around restorative justice.
Well, I'm just not very happy. I'm sorry that essentially the answers we've heard is we haven't done anything on the attitudes and stopping men behaving like this, although we might do in the future. And we've had one meeting about restorative justice, which isn't covered in the report. And I'm not really sure how that's good enough. But and we haven't explored how it would work, or if we have, there's nothing in the report. And we might do something on the attitudes of men in the future. But actually, the only stuff that's being done is being done by the police, which is great. Not really anything to do with what Merton is doing. So I'm not very satisfied, I'm afraid, with either of those answers.
Peter, can I come back on the
Yes, Agatha, please.
on the education one? Ellie is actually working with schools with Keith Chipman on educating the young people, about behaviour and violence against women and violence against boys themselves. So they have a piece of work that they are doing. They have been working with the schools. So it's the education. So Ellie's doing that with the schools. So it is being tackled.
Very pleased to hear it, but it's not in the report in front of us.
I will take that feedback and make sure we include that in the next version.
Let me come to Sally. Everyone has it.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your report. I've had a few complaints from residents about the lighting in certain parts of the borough, and nowhere do you mention lighting, and women and sometimes men feel more ill at ease in an ill-lit area, and sometimes the LED lighting that's been put in, and I think Merton did replace some of it that was inadequate, has proved to leave places a little bit darker. And maybe I've missed it if you've mentioned it, but do you work with the lighting team to make sure the lighting is adequate where it helps everyone feel a little bit safer, particularly women?
So, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I think it's an important point to raise, and lighting is certainly something that we see getting reflected by residents in terms of sometimes where they have concerns around safety. We've referred to it in 2.12 in the report in relation to those requests. When we receive those requests, the lighting team are conducting reviews of the lighting in those locations. And I think that's something we'll continue to do on a location by location basis, where we're identifying the locations of concern, be that through individual reports or be that through the work of the Crime Stoppers survey, for example.
And Chair, could I just come back? If you are doing that, are you having any impact on it?
I'm not in a position to update on what the outcomes of that has been and what the impacts have been on safety in those locations. I think that's something that we'd be in a position perhaps 6 months from now, where we've got examples where lighting levels have been changed to provide a specific update.
I'd just add on that, actually, Sally, in my own ward, that's been quite an issue. And when the lamps were inspected, the lantern, which is the bulb bit, was found to be not working properly in a number of cases. So they have now been replaced. It makes a huge difference. Now I'm waiting for everyone to say, well, why can't we have them all replaced, not just a few? But it does make a big difference. It's worth pushing for.
Thank you, Chair. And it does actually follow on to the point about lighting in outdoor spaces. There's obviously a balance that needs to be struck between, in all this, I suppose, with the sort of feeling that there's the feeling of there's feeling safer and there's being safer. Obviously, the information in the report, and I know that Stephen Hammond as well has been having a lot of requests, particularly about the lighting in Wandle Park, which is why he's petitioned the council specifically around that. Is there information that would suggest that there is a feeling that women and girls and potentially men as well would feel safer in Wandle Park if there was lighting? It'd just be interesting to understand how you balance something like that, where it's there's the feeling safe, there's the being safe, and obviously if you were acting just on the feeling of being safe, then the lighting would be changed tomorrow, because that's sort of the impression that's being given. But so just be interesting to understand how you balance that.
Thank you. I think, yeah, it's a very good question. And I would say the answer is that there's probably a range of views among members of the public, and some who would say that they believe lighting would make them feel safer, and others who would have a different view. And I've spoken to residents who've had both of those views. And then there's also the question, as you kind of delineated, around the actual impact of the safety, and that it's definitely not a simple case. I would say that, you know, increase the lighting in any location and then safety will go up. I think it depends on the specifics of that location, and it depends on the impact that change would have on the pattern of use of that location. There could be, for example, you could have a location where which is not really sort of used or chosen by people as a route to go through in hours of darkness, but by increasing the lighting through a path, for example, you may potentially encourage more people to use that, and then that could have then potential consequences on crime. And you also have the considerations around what's going on outside of that corridor of lighting. Taking a sort of, you know, a path through a park, for example, if you have the path lit, but, you know, 10 meters away from that, it's in darkness, you still have a situation where a potential perpetrator could be sort of hidden in the darkness, so to speak, but have a clear view of who's walking through the park. And this is one of the reasons why we're working closely with the Met Police to look at the potential measures and consider very carefully, both in terms of which the views of local residents on the wider impact of those measures, but also what the potential or what we believe will be the likely impacts on risk and crime at the location.
Thank you, Chair.
Ask specifically again on Wundle, are there, given the requests from residents and appreciating what you've said, are there any plans to sort of consult locally or try to have a bit more of a conversation with residents around the area and those that use the park to understand sort of their views, as you say, given there may be a balance of views?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. We were at Wandle Park this morning. The Safe Merton team was at Wandle Park this morning with some of the ward councillors and some of the local residents and the Residents Association, and also the Collierswood Parks residents group as well. I think we'll look to continue to reach out through to those groups and other local residents, and also through the ward council as well, to make sure that we continue to take on board the residents' views around the location and any sort of proposed changes we may be making.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's important that we thank the staff that are engaged in this work. It's very easy to say, why aren't you having this meeting? Why aren't you doing that? It's a huge issue. And I think in paragraph 243 on page 264, we've identified, the report has identified some of the issues that have brought this to greater prominence. And I think no right-minded person wouldn't want to see us developing strategies there. But the things that keep me awake as a councillor at night are in relation to, this is a task group to look at the safety of women and girls. Probably the most vulnerable group of girls are those in the care of the local authority. And we have seen what can happen when predators home in on such vulnerable young girls. And I know, what we all should know, that we have a responsibility for those children in the care of the local authority. And I think it's really important that we know that this is not an area that is being ignored, and that when we talk about the safety of women and girls, we look towards the most vulnerable groups. Now, it's possible that this is something that is considered somebody else's responsibility and it doesn't fall under this particular task group, but it would be lovely to be hearing from time to time that all is well, and that the people that we are directly responsible for are being cared for and protected from the kind of monsters that are exploiting such vulnerable young girls.
Thank you, Councillor. Certainly, such a subject is one of the areas of focus at the Children's and Family Services MACE group, the multi-agency child exploitation group that looks to identify where specific young people may be vulnerable or at risk, both on an individual basis, but also if there's locations or themes that are coming to light that seem to indicate risk towards a particular group of young people, including young people in the local authorities' care. Safer Merton links in with that group, and one of the areas we'll be looking to get more information sharing happening is where we're identifying information through reports coming into us that may not on the surface relate to a specific individual, but they may still actually be a warning sign of some behavior or activity that could be putting young people at risk. We're making sure that we're going to be feeding that through to that multi-agency child exploitation panel so that they can look and determine what safeguarding actions will be taken. It's certainly an area where we could highlight further in the reports to reflect that that activity is going on.
Billy, and then I'm going to draw this session to a close.
Thank you, Chair. If I can just say first that I know the Merton Street pastors do excellent work in the borough. I know there's one in the room this evening, and they all do fantastic work, and I'm happy to support them. I have to say I was surprised, though, reading this report, given that we've come up with £38,000 to go towards new interventions with the intention of helping protect or reduce violence against women and girls, which doesn't seem that big an amount. I'm sure we could find more. But I was surprised to see that we've given the largest chunk of that money to a religious charity, which, though it does good work, I'm surprised to see that we have done that. So I suppose I just would like to ask for some kind of assurance that we're confident that's the best use of that money, that there aren't other possible avenues that we could have looked to use that money rather than necessarily going towards, as I say, a religious charity, though I understand it does good work, and I'm very supportive of the work they do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So I think in relation to their activities, one of the advantages is the fact that they're established and have a presence in some of the key locations, and we want to make sure we're able to move quickly with some of that funding and actually get the implementation started, and so we can start to make a difference as soon as possible. I think moving forward, we're looking at securing further funding. We have the Home Office's Safer Streets 4, which is about to be launched. We're expecting to be able to bid for that probably sometime starting in March. The exact dates for the bidding haven't been announced. And there'll be a range of measures we'll be looking to put together as part of that bid. Now, I think with it may well be the case with the initial funding allocation. I don't think we'll be looking at putting in a further bid at the moment for the street passes, but it may be for some of the other areas we'll be looking at that Safer Streets Round 4 funding to go towards some of those other areas, and also some of the areas that comprised some of the bids that we put in last year, which we weren't successful in. We'll be looking to secure funding for those through that further bid.
Please.
Can I say I didn't have a hand in it? So it's got nothing to do with me, the street pastors, the funding. But what I will say that the street pastors, when they are there at night, they always let the police know that they're around. So the police, anything they will report back to the police. So it's gathered by the churches together, but they're not doing it as a religious group. They sort of support the community. So yeah.
Okay, We are asked whether we wish to endorse the recommendation to Cabinet that Merton does sign up to the Mayor's Night Safety Charter. And as a sub-question to that, whether that champion should be an elected member or maybe a figure from the community. But on the night, someone is it on this, on the Night Safety Charter? Let me finish this point, then I'll come to you. Okay. Yes. So let's take the Night Safety Charter, which you can read the details at the end here, and the responsibilities that involves also. But it does require the nomination of a champion. Is this something that we feel we should be signing up to, along with the 20 other London boroughs that have already done so? Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Less than enthusiastic, but okay. Yeah, okay. And just, just a quick indication, a show of hands, should that be an independent figure in the community, or an elected member? Independent community figure?
Didn't we suggest it would be a question for the Violence Against Women and Girls Board?
Indeed. Well, no, I think Peter said he would take an indication from us, but yes, ultimately it must be for them to, I think, decide that. Aidan?
Yeah, no, I think it'd be good to hear the board. I mean, although it would be probably good to hear also colleagues' views on elected versus non-elected. I mean, my wider point on that is it'll be good if the group also maybe come up with 2 or 3 deliverables, action points, targets for a reasonable period, whether that be as part of the plan or that's existing or not, so that adequate resource can be given. And I say that, I appreciate budgets are tight, but I say that looking at, it's very easy, we can appoint a champion. I think we all do definitely agree that, but I want to see the champion actually have all the tools and resources to do the champion's role.
Mm-hmm.
I think we all agree.
All right, fine with that. Good. So yes, we endorse the idea of tonight champion. And I think otherwise, I'm reminded by Peter's remarks about our responsibilities for corporate parenting, and in the days when the late Maxi Martin was the cabinet member responsible for children's services, we were reminded of our responsibilities there rather more often than we are now. I think we've all done the training and we've probably forgotten it. So it is for real, and it does matter, and it is the area where we can really contribute. But yes, Peter, thank you for bringing this to us this evening, and indeed to Agatha as the cabinet member for coming in, and Katie for the earlier session there. So I did promise Simon that I would allow a fairly quick.
Thank you, Chair. You'll have to forgive my ignorance of this committee's proceedings, but when this paper goes to Cabinet, will it include some more information about the work that's going on in schools, which is missing? Some reflects some of the comments from the officer about the importance of work with men, as well as the focus on women, which of course is quite right, and also the work that has been done on restorative justice, and how we are going to do what the motion says, which is explore the potential for restorative justice. Will all those things be included in the paper before it goes to Cabinet, or not? And if they're not, can this committee ask for them to be included?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, part of the purpose of being here is for that pre-scrutiny of the paper. So those points can certainly be taken back into the version of the paper that we'll take to Cabinet.
Right. I hope we won't take as long over the next item, but I do need you to approve the recommendations from the work on the nighttime economy, that they be forwarded to Cabinet. The status of this at the moment is that they have been seen and discussed with Councillor Pritchard as the relevant Cabinet member who is content with the draft recommendations. We now really just want to move them forward to Cabinet within the life of this council, please. So are we happy to do that? Agree to the recommendations that that goes to Cabinet in March? Agreed. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. No, I think this is great work. It's really interesting to read, and good to see some of the detail develop on that. My question was, how does this work interplay with the work for shopping parades? So I'm thinking particularly in my ward, Pollard Hill, there are several shopping parades. And I previously put in a bid in the capital fund for community Wi-Fi, because the ward in particular is one of the areas of digital exclusion. I just want to understand, while we've talked about Wi-Fi here, what is the reality of delivering it for this project when we couldn't deliver it for some of the most vulnerable in our community?
Well, the high streets work is restricted, in fact, to the 6 main high streets, Wimbledon and the others. So no, I'm afraid it doesn't cover Pollard's Hill. So yeah, I have to look for funding from another source there, really.
Thank you, Chair. No, just we were sort of chatting before the meeting, and it just see, having been involved in some of the task group meetings on the specific high streets, and like most of us or many of us having a high street in my ward, I just found the paper quite light, really. I didn't think it was that reflective of certainly the conversations that I was part of in the task group. I can't remember how many of the specific task groups, may have been just Village and Rains Park I was at. And I mean, in terms of giving more detail in the paper, I don't know if it'd be helpful to have a bit more of a summary of what was said at each one, because whilst there might be a general view across all the high streets, maybe there are sort of specific issues that it's worth having on the record that was raised at those meetings as part of the SWOT analysis. And then no, I just certainly, as I say, from the high street in my ward, found from our own work, sort of surveying residents and speaking to businesses, there's a lot that wasn't in there in terms of what I think sort of they'd recommend around sort of parking, business rates, rents, sort of various sort of bigger issues. I appreciate the sort of limits to the scope of what the sort of task groups could look at. But in terms of having sort of high street recommendations, as I said, I think, yeah, the general view is just that the recommendations in the paper itself just seem quite light on the detail and seem to miss quite a bit.
I think that's a fair comment, in fact, because the report itself does include a section on each of the high streets. I think I'm talking to the Rains Park Forum about this when that comes up in a couple of weeks' time. So yes, there is the detail. Without taking up too much time here, there are things that all high streets need, but equally I was very concerned that we find what gives each high street its unique character, and that is very much rooted in the history of the area, I think. So I am keen that, as well as public toilets and a scheme for the businesses to have an online platform to promote and market them, that we also seek out what is unique with the help of Merton Heritage about each area, and I think that's what will provide the cohesion and make it important and stand out from the others. So that is in the report. Councillor Pritchard, I see. Do you want to come in on that, Owen?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak on this, Chair. And it was good catching up with you last week on this report. I think one has to take into account the timing of where we are now in sort of February, and there's one more cabinet meeting to come, and then we're entering Purda, and then I know Peter's standing down, and I also know that as soon as there's a new administration coming in, there will be other things on their radar, and not necessarily this report straight away. But that is not actually to diminish what I think are really important points by Councillor Barlow, and rarely will I say that, but the truth is that they do need to be included, that we do actually need the specifics of different high streets. I think there is a possible course of action here where we just look to receive the macro recommendations at the next cabinet meeting, so they arrive within this civic year and administrative cycle, and they can be answered and be received, but with an acceptance that there will be a wider contextual report that will have specific recommendations perhaps for each of the areas that will follow on, but unfortunately that won't be taken within this civic year for the reasons that I hope I've just made clear, and certainly I know Councillor Southgate is aware of. Just a suggestion, obviously, no more than that.
Thank you for that. Good, good. Okay, we'll close on that section. And we're going to come on in closed session.